we were doing large platters to share. It's so frustrating to me if I'm out with 6 people.
I love this.
And I order something, I want to eat that. Someone puts it in the center of the table, and by the time it comes to me, it's a smudge on the plate. I want to eat the dish, and I want to actually pick through the dish. I want to eat several different bites. I want to make the perfect bite. I want to make the not-so-perfect bite. I hate that way of dining.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Today in the show, I have such a great conversation with Tom Colicchio. He is the author of a terrific new memoir, Why I Cook. It has recipes as well, but really it gets into Tom's history, starting in New Jersey, working his way to New York, and everywhere in between. The man is a legend, and we talk all about his restaurant career. We also talk a little bit about the recent election and also the state of the restaurant industry. Tom is one of my favorite thinkers in food. Will he ever run for Congress? We actually answer that question. It's so great having Tom in the studio, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Tom Colicchio, welcome to This is Taste. It's such a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So, hey, how's the fishing going right now in the fall?
Well, the fishing's great right now. Unfortunately, I've been so busy since mid-August, starting with a family vacation and then shooting season 22 of Top Chef, and then with the book coming out and the book launch, and then going back and doing the finale of Top Chef. And now I'm back in New York, and I'm hoping to go tomorrow, but it probably will be the last trip of the season.
Oh, no way. So when you say go, where are you going from? What's your typical...
Well, I have my boat in Long Island out in Mattatuck. However, I think I'm going to stay local. We have a captain that we fish with occasionally out of Brooklyn. And the fishing around New York right now is fantastic.
Great.
You know, tons of striped bass. There's tuna very, very close to shore right now. So that's what we may do tomorrow.
So you go to like the southern tip of Brooklyn and you launch out of there?
I'm not exactly sure what his marina is. It's actually up by Marine Park, I guess.
Yeah, Marine Park, sure.
Yeah. But anyway.
I think that's like less known for folks who aren't from the city, that you can fish off of Brooklyn. It's a beautiful fishing.
Well, the ocean. You're in the ocean.
Yeah.
The ocean's the ocean. and there's a ton of bait. There's whales. There's porpoise. There's it's a great, actually, because of the way it funnels in from south and then west.
Yeah.
It holds a lot of fish and a lot of bait.
What draws you to the boat?
I've been fishing. I started fishing at a very young age, even before I was cooking. I was about 7 or so, and just always really enjoyed it. And then I didn't fish for a while and started fly fishing for trout and did that for a bunch, and then started fly fishing for bonefish, tarpon, and permit in saltwater. And then the last couple of years just got the tuna bug and have been fishing offshore.
Tuna, and that's like offshore, those are like the bigger
offshore
boats, yeah.
Anywhere from 30 to 100 miles offshore.
Did you ever fish when you were working out of Virginia Beach during that time in your career?
No, it's funny. I didn't. I wasn't fishing a lot then.
Yeah.
But I regret it because there's great white marlin fishing there.
Yeah, definitely.
And no, I didn't fish at all when I was there.
Yeah, I love that moment in your life when you're down in Virginia Beach, working 8-9 months down there.
Yeah.
Well, this conversation, Tom, we could go into so many areas and really we could talk about TV all day. But listen, I want to talk about your career because Why I Cook is absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. You and Joshua David Stein, your collaborator, have brought your story to life through really intimate stories and revealing stories. So I want to start and talk about your early life with cookbooks. You talk about how your father brought home books like The Joy of Cooking, La Technique, and the New York Times Cookbook. He was a corrections officer and, had these books at the jail, a prison, and he brought them home and you started reading them. What was that like, Tom?
Well, prior to that, I was interested in cooking. I was cooking a lot at home. In fact, I was a short order cook at the age of 13. And so, my dad wasn't the kind of guy who would sit you down and have long discussions about your future and things like that. He was kind of quiet, but he did come home with these books. And, at the time I didn't think much of it. It was like, oh yeah, it's just cool. Dad brought home some books. But looking back on it, it really showed me that he was taking an interest. He was paying attention at least to what his 3 boys were interested in. And I think gently nudges all in the direction that served us really well. My younger brother is a very accomplished high school basketball coach He's won 7 state championships
In Jersey?
in Jersey.
Yeah.
And my older brother he was an accountant, and then worked in various different businesses, and never really been jealous of my brother my entire life, except now that he's retired. I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just my dad was paying attention, and what was really interesting is specifically with the book La Technique, because I struggle with ADHD and not even knowing it because it wasn't diagnosed back then. This was the 70s, and really struggled reading recipes and getting through recipes and trying to understand what they were trying to get at. And when I read La Technique and I learned that it was really about techniques and methods, not so much about recipes, it was like, wow, this is completely changed my outlook on the way I cooked. And it was great. Just a couple of days ago, we did a dinner with Jacques Pepin for his 90th birthday at the restaurant. It was just fantastic.
How's Jacques doing? Is he good?
He's getting up there, but he's good. He is. He's good.
Yeah. What is your relationship now with the recipe? Do you still struggle?
I hate them. Absolutely hate me. My first book, Think Like a Chef, the whole purpose of that book was to teach people how not to use recipes.
No.
Unfortunately, I had to use recipes to teach people how to do that. And it's kind of hard to write a cookbook without it. But my favorite cookbooks were like Elizabeth David, where the assumption was if you're reading this book, you know how to cook already. So we're just going to give you kind of vague amounts of what you should be putting in here. But there was an assumption that you kind of understood it.
I mean, I set you up for that question because I knew that about your first book.
Sure.
And really, it's really a smart observation because, most cookbooks are like a foreign language to people who have spent very little time in the kitchen. You need to find those skills. So how do you find those skills without a recipe, so to speak?
Well, I think you have to look at every recipe that you do. Number one, I think that if you want to be a good cook, you have to cook. And I think that if people, a home cook, not a professional chef, but a home cook, if they want to really become accomplished, they have to learn the basics. They have to learn how to braise. They have to learn how to roast. They have to learn how to cook green vegetable. They should have a certain proficiency in knife skills, things like that. But as you're cooking, you have to do it with intention. So if you're reading a recipe and they're teaching you how to, the recipe calls for braising, understand what you're doing there. Because if you understand what you're doing there, it can be applied to anything. Right?
With different stocks. You could use soy sauce, you could use beef stock.
Exactly. And not only that, then if you really want to start adding things to the braise to create flavor, like if you want it spicy, that's a good time to add chilies. If you want it, have a bunch of different spices and herbs, that's a good time to use it in the braise. And so anyway, understanding what the recipe is trying to get at, and then sort of, okay, I don't have to follow, once I understand this is braising, I don't need to follow this recipe anymore. I may follow the recipes for the other ingredients that are in there, but I know the basics. I know I have to take this shoulder of lamb. I know I have to tie it. I know I have to sear it on all sides. I know I'm going to add mirepoix to the pan. I know I'm going to add some kind of liquid. And that's it.
Yep.
And so I think that the home cook needs to approach it as a hobby. This is a hobby that I want to get good at. Just very much like I play guitar. I play every day. All right? And now I can get by on learning 3 chords, and I'll probably sound okay around a campfire. It doesn't make me a musician, right? You have to learn.
You're proficient enough to do like a blues jam, though, I would imagine.
That's fine. But my point is that unless you start understanding how scales are formed, why certain chords are in that scale progression, how to solo over that using scales, but then also using modes and also using chord tones and things like that. Understanding how music actually works and creating that language, then you can start playing with others, and you don't need music. You can improvise, you can play because you understand the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at back to recipes. If you watch any cook, line cook, prep cook, look at a recipe, they look at the mise en place, they look at the ingredients. They never look at the directions.
No, it's not.
It's amazing to watch. You just look at the direction, the ingredients.
It's not a recipe. That's just it. I mean, it's a recipe, a very loose recipe, but and that's kind of drives me crazy about cookbooks these days. Everybody's just so focused on every little detail. Is that a quarter cup? Did I measure that right? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Tom, you are preaching to the choir, and I think
it's not baking. And I think that you just have to allow yourself a certain amount of freedom. You're not going to mess it up. So that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid of messing up this recipe. I went out and I bought this piece of meat. I'm going to mess it up. You're going to mess it up by doing things like taking it out of the braising liquid and letting it cool down, not in liquid.
Yeah.
That's going to mess it up.
Yeah.
And that's going to dry it out because it needs to actually sit in the braising liquid as it cools down.
Yeah,
right?
It's like
completely cools down.
Yeah,
that's not a recipe. Doesn't teach you that.
No,
right?
No, and it's about reps, and we'll get into your growth. I want to talk about the summer after high school graduation, you find yourself at a restaurant called Evelyn's, and really, I love this moment in the book where you talk about the kitchen staff. It really gives shades of Kitchen Confidential. I mean, this is the same era essentially Tony was writing that book. But what are the characters like in that kitchen, and what is the spark that's lit? Because it's clearly this is an important moment in your career.
Yeah, it's funny. I can see them. I can visualize them. Bobby was this kind of big, wasn't heavy, just a tall, charismatic, handsome guy who just he had just control over his domain. Like this was his area. He was like the sous chef, but like more of the senior sous chefs, and he just had it together. And it's like you wanted to be like him. Alfred, who was the chef, was a little quieter, but again, just went about his business. Ramon, who I don't mention in the book, was another sous chef, Puerto Rican kid who's same thing. Like he'd been there for a bunch of years, worked his way up, and just knew what he was doing. And then there was Slim in the prep kitchen, who was a much older black man.
He was like a mentor in some sense.
Well, in a way, where he was the first person who said to me, I asked, because he did all the cooking, right? Not the line cooking, but the cooking, like make the soups and all the sauces and things like that. And I would ask him about the recipes. He was like, "Yeah, they give them to me, but I don't use them. I use my own." And Tony, who was one of the other guys in the prep kitchen, who my first day pulled this massive prank on me and gave me 150 pounds of shrimp. And then when I was done peeling 150 pounds of shrimp, he gave me another 100 pounds of shrimp, different size. This was supposed to be something that all the prep crew shared, and he just dumped it all on me.
Oh, the new guy gets the hazing.
Yeah. But it was fine. But then it was also, I was young. I was 17 years old and, working with a lot of college-aged, young women and going out to bars and
You were seduced, Tom.
I was absolutely seduced. This was, and I had no intention of going to college, and this is what I wanted to do. And I fell into this group of misfits, and it felt right. And then there was also something about the frenetic energy of the kitchen was actually worked with my ADHD. It calmed me down. That and self-medicating also kind of did the same thing.
Yeah, you talk about the Colombian marching powder, which played a role in kitchens. And we're talking about late 70s here, right? Early 80s. What's the time period? Just to set that for us.
So Evelyn's was very early 80s. I graduated high school in 1980. So that was 1980.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got a lot of photos in the book, Tom. The fits are really looking nice, and really, I love the book because it gets really personal. And at 40 Main Street, a restaurant you end up working at, it seems that's when you think your career will evolve into becoming a chef, and you learn to write daily menus. Talk about this early menu planning in your career. I think it's really interesting when you go from working at a place like Evelyn's, which has like more of a formatted menu, to like you're really pushing yourself at this point.
Yeah, Evelyn's the only special of the day was whether it was scrod or cod.
Right.
It wasn't a big moment, but after Evelyn's, I worked at a red sauce Italian restaurant, and these were the kind of restaurants that I kind of envisioned myself in. And until I started reading magazines, when I was a young cook, I was just obsessed with reading everything I can get my hands on. And when I started reading Cuisine magazine, started reading about restaurants in New York, like Quilted Giraffe, and even places like the American place, Larry Forgione's and Jonathan Waxman, now started hearing about American cuisine. And now here I find myself in this little storefront restaurant with a 60-seat restaurant that we were doing American cuisine. The chef Jim Smith, graduated from the CIA, and he was of that age. And this is what he was doing. So this introduced me to, and I was reading about Alice Waters, and I was reading about all these other chefs that were practicing, Ken Frank in California at La Toque, and these other chefs. And so all of a sudden now we're doing this food. And I just was completely immersed in it. Now, and the cool thing was that we would do a menu every day. And so Jim at first did it on his own. And then there was a sous chef, Jerry Bryan, who I talk about in the book, who actually book was in memory to him. He passed away just as I was finishing the book. Man. And we would sit around the table every day. We would come in. He would say, "This is what's in. What do you want to do?" And we'd start talking. And at first, I just was contributing. It wasn't like, this is my dish. It was like, you talk about a dish and say, well, what about we add this? What if we do that? We have pheasants in. Well, how about if we, roast the breast, but take the leg, we make a roulade out of the leg, we stuff it with wild mushrooms, we braise that. We have some wild huckleberries, let's add that into the sauce. So that was the conversation. It was very, very kind of loose. And then the dishes would come out, and we, and I was a line cook. And I also, because of Evelyn's and because of Chestnut Tavern, I was a good line cook. And at 40 Main Street, I was just a fast good.
Yeah.
I cook.
It's obvious that clearly you had the hand skills to make it work, but then you had to zoom out as in your career and think about
Of course, yeah.
flavors and thinking about how seasonality works. And really, this is, to listeners, this is really the birth of new American cuisine in the tri-state area. This is a New Jersey restaurant, and it's really a restaurant that got acclaim. And I'm observing in the book, this is when you really got the New York Times stars bug. Like, it bit you pretty.
Right. Ann Sims, who was the New York Times reviewer for New Jersey, gave us 3 stars, and I was like, wow, okay, this is really cool. But I felt good. I felt that all the things that I was reading about, now I'm doing. And I think we're doing it really well. So I was like, okay, now I'm ready to take the trip across the river.
The trip across the river is quite the trip, and you end up working at the Quilted Giraffe, which, not only because the owner and proprietor Barry Wine was innovating in a way that was getting national acclaim, but you were working with some incredible talent, Wayne Nish, David Kinch, and many others, and really you are at the center of the beating heart of the culinary universe. Tell me, how intoxicating was this moment?
I mean, for so many reasons, it was great. When I came to New York, I wanted to work at Quilted Giraffe. And I dropped my resume off and didn't hear back. I ended up going up to Jam's, Jonathan Waxman's restaurant, where a woman named Helen Shardak interviewed me. I didn't remember her name at the time. I'm going to say at the time, she introduced me, but she said, go see this guy who's opening a restaurant, or he's taking over a restaurant called Gotham. What I didn't know was Helen Shardak was Alfred Portali's wife. Mm-hmm. And I got to know her much later on. And it was funny because I remember at one point when we were having dinner one night, she said to me about Jams. I said, you interviewed me. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I went to Jams, you interviewed me and told me to go down to Alfred's. And so, so Alfred hired me and I worked there for about 4 days. Now, Alfred had just started. And for those that remember, Gotham the first chef was Brendan Walsh, and Barbara Kafka was the consultant.
Oh, right.
And the restaurant was failing miserably. Yeah. Alfred took it over, and Alfred had an amazing pedigree. Worked for Gerard in France. Worked for Jacques Maximin, I think in France and in New York. And so, but when I got there, they were still doing the dishes from the previous chef. He hadn't started putting things on the menu, and Barry called me, and so.
Which you had originally interviewed at, which you had...
this was the interview. So he called, he gave him a resume, he called me, brought me in for an interview. And the first thing he said to me was, I don't hire people like you. I said, people like me? He said, well, you're a career cook. I don't hire those people.
Well, your catering background probably hurt you too.
No.
The hotel background.
No. He didn't care about that. No. He just said, you're a career cook. I don't hire career cooks. And his restaurant was staffed with career changers. Wayne Nish had a printing business. I think David Kinch was a chef, but I think he only worked in one restaurant before he got there. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of people who were career changers there. And Barry was a career changer. He was a corporate attorney. And so he told me that he was thinking of opening a second restaurant, and he knew that eventually he'd have to hire people like me. So he brought me in, and I had to do a week-long trial. And the last day, I was with Barry just a couple of days ago. He came to the Jacques Pepin dinner. He doesn't remember all of this, of course. But I was down, on the line, and I was working next to this woman, Marcy, and Marcy was leaving, and I wanted this job. And all week long, I was getting yelled at. I wasn't cooking. I was standing there and still getting yelled at.
You're just observing.
I was just observing. I was getting yelled at. And so I remember going home, and my girlfriend at the time, I said, I really want this job, and I don't know what's happening here. I keep getting yelled at. And she said, well, what are you going to do? Do something about it.
Yeah.
So Friday night before service started, I looked at Marcy, and I said, do me a favor. She said, what? I said, get out of my way. And I don't think I was that polite. And she was taken aback by it. And so I said, I want this job, and if I get it, I want to get it on my own merits. I need to work the station tonight. And she said, okay. So she walked off the station. And Barry said he hired me because I was able to move around a lot of saute pans at one time.
Oh, that was like the one indicator that you had your skills? Okay.
That was the big thing. But, 4 months later, he gave me the sous chef's position.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the perspective that he had. Was there value to seeking out career changers, and did you ever use that methodology when hiring at Gramercy Tavern, at Kraft, at other restaurants?
Yes and no. I mean, I wasn't opposed to ever hiring someone who was in a career change, and I did over the course of my career. Many people, but it's hard to bring someone with no experience.
Yes.
And then
yes.
the other problem with someone who's making a career change, they want to move up quickly, and you can't progress up quickly through the ranks. You're going to start in the prep kitchen, or you're going to start in garde manger, and you're going to have to work up. And so a lot of times those career changers, they want to move too quickly through the kitchen. But there's always someone who's coming in that's making a change.
So let me ask you, why did you leave Quilted Giraffe? I think Jay Chestis wrote a great piece maybe like 5 years ago about the history of this restaurant.
Yeah.
And really, there's just so much to say about it. But you clearly had other plans.
Well, no, listen, I loved working there. Number one, we were closed Saturday and Sunday. So we were only open Monday through Friday, dinner only. It was
what a
fantastic job.
Progressive way to look at
things.
things.
I think Barry did at the end of the week, he would come by, not everyone, but he would come by and just like put cash in your hand, say, thanks, great week, here you go.
Wow.
And, I really, really loved working. I loved the food that we were doing. For the most part, I liked the people I worked with. But I wanted to be a chef. And my next step for me was I had to figure out what my style was going to be.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of goes back, if you really want to get into the culinary history. Everybody thinks of Nouvelle Cuisine, and they think of it as this moment where chefs started making lighter sauces.
Yeah, like Bocuse, right?
Well, he was actually more. I'm talking more like the Trois-Gros brothers. Bocuse was kind of Nouvelle Cuisine, but really more classical.
Flour is leaving
more
the equation,
classical.
Right?
Flour was leaving the equation, but also other new techniques, lighter methods of cooking, and also new ingredients like kiwi. You think the kiwi was like the darling of Nouvelle Cuisine. The other thing that Nouvelle Cuisine did was, prior to that, most things in haute cuisine restaurants, everything was plated in the dining room. Everything was served French style and it was plated in the dining room off a Gardon. And now all of a sudden, chefs started plating the food, therefore putting their signature on a dish.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you started to see, this is a Trois-Gros brother dish. I see that. This is Alain Chappelle. I can see that. I can see his fingerprint there. I can see, Sandarin, his fingerprint. You can see Frédéric Giardet, what he was doing. And so for me, I thought, well, this has to be important. I have to have my style. And I thought, okay, I had an opportunity to go back to 40 Main Street. Danny Canizio, who was the owner, called up and said Jim was leaving, wanted to know if I would come back. And I said yes, under one condition, that my friend Jerry Bryan come with me, because we were talking about doing a restaurant together. And so he agreed to do that. My feeling was I wanted to come back and figure out what my style was going to be away from New York. I didn't want to do that in New York.
Yeah, because you're back over the river, I wanted to safer land.
It was a little safer, and I could make some mistakes, and I wasn't going to get crucified, in New Jersey for making a mistake, and so that's what I did, and it worked. I did figure out what that style was. That and a few stages that I did, and I was still learning. I was still reading. I was still going to restaurants. Back then there was no internet, so you couldn't make a few clicks and see what someone was doing. You had to get on the plane and go to France or go to Spain or go to Italy. And but all of this was in service of creating my style.
Your style. And really in the book you write about your time at that restaurant. You had to make a tough choice. There was a split. I'm trying to go no spoilers because you should read this book, and I don't want to rephrase everything. I'm not going to talk about Thomas Keller. You work with him for a minute. Please read the book.
More than a minute.
Yeah. Sorry, not a minute, but we're talking in terms of Gramercy Tavern and Craft. It's a little bit of a shorter moment, but
well, yeah, I wasn't the chef there. I was the chef there, and the restaurant closed.
Yeah,
I left before it closed, but. It's funny. I didn't, and we won't give the whole thing away. There was a reason I left working for Thomas, and he was the only person who I sent the chapter to him. I'm very good friends with him. And I sent the chapter to him ahead of time. I said, Thomas, I'm going to be do you remember? I was having dinner with him, and I said, do you remember how I left Raquel? He said, yeah. I said, I'm writing this memoir, and I'm going to talk about it. I hope you're okay with that. And he said, sure. And I said, I'll just send you the chapter. And I did. And he said, that's exactly what happened. And that's fine. I'm okay with it. It's your book.
Yeah. It's a great chapter. And it really shows how, Thomas Keller failed in New York for reasons that are pretty common today. Real estate is the biggest problem.
Well, that and the fact that his partner, Serge Raoul, who just passed away, who's such a great guy, who had Raoul's, he wanted a different kind of restaurant.
Yeah.
Serge was the money behind it. It was Raquel, Serge Raoul and Thomas Keller. And Serge wanted more of a fun club, and the bar was that, and then there was a serious restaurant, and the two just didn't work. But that said, we were doing brilliant food there. And there was no doubt in my mind that he was going to go on and just be a massive success. In fact, my biggest regret in life was that when he opened French Laundry, I was going to invest and I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't have the money to, but at the time,
yeah. Well,
my significant other did, and she decided not to.
the Tom Chateau would have been built on that money.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't going to invest a lot of money.
Yeah,
but
right.
It would have been nice. It would have been nice to say, "Hey, I'm his partner."
Yeah, I know. And like Raquel is one of those great failed restaurants that really has this mythology around it. This restaurant that really showed the potential of this chef. I want to now get into, this is like probably my favorite section of the book. And this is what I think many listeners know you as, which is the founding of Gramercy Tavern in New York City. I love this moment where you and Danny Meyer, your partner, your future partner actually, go on a trip to Italy. You don't know each other. This is a bit of like a plan. It's like a date, essentially. You're dating at that point because you want to make sure you vibe. And like,
It was like a third date.
Third date. Okay. You'd had probably gone out around to some places in New York.
We had talked. I mean, so Danny and I met each other in 1991. Actually, probably before that. So when I was at Mondrian, Danny had come into the restaurant. And in 1991, I received Food and Wine Magazine's Best New Chef, along with Michael Armano, who was the chef at Union Square Cafe, and 8 other chefs. It was 10 every year. And so I met Danny and spent some time with him there. And then the following year, I went back. So it's 1992. I knew Mondrian was closing. Danny had come to the restaurant a bunch. And so I I'm sitting next to him at a lunch or something, and I said, "Hey, when I get back to New York, I want to talk to you about something." He said, "All right." I didn't want it to get out there, so that's why I didn't tell him there. And so I got home, I called him, and I said, "Listen, Mondrian's closing," and he said, "Well, why are you telling me?" I said, "Well, I think we should do a restaurant together." And his response was pretty funny. He said, "I'll never do another restaurant again." And I said, "Okay," and that was it. And then he called me back a week later, and he had said he spoke to a mutual friend of ours, Robert Chatterton, who was a wine importer, and asked Robert if, talked to him, "Hey, Tom, Tom, right?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Called me, wants to do a restaurant." And he said his response was, if Sandy Koufax called you up and said he wanted to pitch for your team, you'd probably say yes.
Oh my gosh, you got the Sandy Koufax reference.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice analogy. And just to be clear, Danny had been running Union Square Cafe.
Yeah.
So that was the restaurant that he was really staking his career on, well-reviewed, to expand within the neighborhood. Probably some risk on his side, but clearly, you're shaking your head.
The risk, not that it was, because it was actually, the neighborhoods were different. Even though they're close to each other, there's the dividing line is 14th Street. Right? Everything below 14th Street and everything above. We were on 20th Street. So it was close enough. And it was a very different restaurant. I think the risk were, listen, we both took risks because we both put a lot of money. I mean, this is what people didn't know prior to this book. Danny didn't just bring me along and give me like 2 points as the chef. My partner and I, ponied up a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so we all took risks there. That was the risk. The risk is we put $3 million into a restaurant. At the time, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And still a lot of money. And so that was the risk. But we had a great rent deal. And what Danny and I talked about on that trip to Italy wasn't about food. We didn't talk about, service or anything like that. We talked about what we felt was missing from the industry and how we wanted to run a business. And we found that we both had very, very similar ideas of how to run a business.
Yeah.
And so the rest of it just was a matter of now arriving at a concept, design, and again, we were very, very much in line with everything and did everything together and, designed it, picked out wood, picked out furniture, picked out artwork, and Danny took care of the wine list. I took care of the menu.
Yeah.
And it was very successful at the beginning, meaning we were busy, but I didn't think we were doing the food that we were able to do.
Yeah, I mean, Why I Cook covers a lot of business decisions, and I think the rent negotiations is really fascinating. You should read this book for really some behind the scenes, because Tom, you call yourself in the book a chef, of course, but then you are a little self-deprecating about being a businessman. You always assumed you were a businessman because you're clearly making these moves, but sometimes you felt like maybe you were trying to live two lives.
Well, you have to as a chef.
Yeah.
Well, as a proprietor, if you own the restaurant, you have to pay attention to rent, food costs, labor costs, everything. It's who's cleaning the floors, how are things getting done, how are you maintaining the restaurant, and so and the struggle that I have is too often if you're a creative, but yet you have to do both. You have to figure out when to be creative and when to put a business hat on. And that's hard because it's hard to cycle back and forth between the two.
Yep.
And so I found that my most creative time was at Mondrian, where I didn't necessarily, not that I didn't care about the business, but I wasn't expected to be the business person there. I was expected to be the chef there. And I had to learn about business. I mean, I had to sit every month and go through a P&L with 5 guys from Morgan Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
They were the owners. And so I got a business education very quickly, but it is difficult to go between the two.
Yeah, but did you feel as a business owner you were succeeding, or were there times when you felt like you were flailing?
I learned a lesson at Mondrian. At Mondrian, we were busy. I got 3 stars at the age of 26 years old. It was a busy restaurant, but so here's the comparison. Mondrian, 59th between 5th and Madison, 80 seats in the dining room.
Yeah.
No seats in the bar, really. It was just a couple of stools at the bar. A 30-seat private dining room. We were paying $35,000 a month in rent.
In like 1990.
Gramercy Tavern. About 120 seats in the dining room, 60 seats in the bar, a 20-seat private dining room. The rent was $9,000.
Clearly.
And so that tells you a lot.
Yeah.
What that does, because if you're looking at running the business, if your rent costs are so low, that means there's a little more elasticity in your pricing, which means your wine prices, right now you want to hit a 24%, 25%. Mm-hmm. Back then you could do a 32% because our rents were so cheap. So you were allowed to be a little more generous with wine pricing. Allowed to be a little more generous. Back then I could run a 32% food cost. Now I have to run a 26% food cost.
Yeah, and Mondrian, just the seats there just weren't enough.
There weren't enough seats. The rent was too high, and so that was a business lesson to be learned.
Yeah.
And when I got to Gramercy, I handed it to Danny. He negotiated a tremendous rent deal.
And a 30-year lease too, right?
No, it was a 20-year lease.
20-year, okay.
And it was 10 with 2 5s.
Okay.
But we ended up buying the space.
Yeah.
I had to twist his arm to do that. But also, the original space was only half of what we had. He only wanted to give up half the space, and we chipped away and said, no, we need the whole space. And little by little, we got there.
It's an interesting moment of contention between you and Danny where the upstairs is available for private dining, which never happened.
No, it didn't happen. I was really disappointed there because I had done the work this was in the middle of Danny starting to open 11 Madison and Tala. At least they were starting construction and stuff. And the opportunity came about, and it would have given us another 120 seats for a private dining room plus a big lounge for pre-party spaces.
Oh my goodness!
You could have cut it in half. We would have had to refurbish the elevator to get people upstairs. The whole thing would have cost $1.2 million, something like that. And for various reasons, it didn't happen.
What does that look like today, having that space?
Well, here's what was really crazy about that. So we bought the space on the ground floor, and again, I had to twist Danny's arm because he didn't want to do it, but to me, it made perfect sense. And the reason it happened is someone bought the building, and they turned it into condos. And they looked at our rent, and our rent killed their deal. So they said, "Do you want to buy the space?" And it doubled the rent from the mortgage doubled. So if we were paying $10,000 a month in rent, it was going to be $20,000 a month in mortgage. We were doing the business to afford it. And then we own the space.
And then you own the space.
And so I got a mutual friend who was in real estate and set Danny down, walked through it, and we ended up buying it. And I remember at the closing telling him, there's going to come a moment in time where you'll make more money leasing this out than running a restaurant. Oh, and we're there right now.
Yeah, you're there right now.
We're there right now.
And you still, that space is still, with Mike Anthony.
Oh, Michael's done a great job.
What that restaurant stands for, I mean, it is now on the top 5 list. You have to visit New York.
Yeah, in fact, I was involved in Gramercy's 30th. We did a dinner at the Food and Wine Aspen.
Yeah.
We did a 30th anniversary dinner, and I got to cook with Michael. He's such a great guy and a fantastic chef. Yeah.
Wonderful chef. So let's go back to the early days of Gramercy. I mean, this kitchen is just a stacked deck. Marco Canora, James Tracy, Jonathan Beno.
That was a little more, that was like more year 3, 4, not the very beginning. But in the beginning, it was still
earlier days, Akhtar Nawab, and of course Claudia Fleming. All of those names we know. I mean, these are all folks who've had tremendous careers, and really they're
also keep in mind all those chefs that you just mentioned. They were cooks. They
No,
weren't
of
even
course.
sous chefs.
No, right.
I had other people that were sous chefs. These two women, Sarah Stegner and Sarah Schaefer, who were sous chefs, and then Juliette Pope, who was a saucier, who went on to become the beverage director there. Now she's selling liquor, wine. And so, yeah, there was just a ton of talent there.
So why? What was the draw then for them? I want to get into the psychology of these cooks wanting to work with Tom Colicchio.
Listen, Gramercy made a lot. We got especially after we got 3 stars. I mean, it was an important restaurant, and people wanted to work there. It was also a busy restaurant, and we were doing a lot of, I think, very interesting things at the time. And we were running a regular menu, which was a price fixed menu, and then we had a tasting menu, which is usually 7 courses. And then we would have a specialty menu. So it could have been truffles in the winter. It could have been a wild mushroom menu or a tomato menu. And then there was another menu that was never written. It was a 10 or 12 course menu, depending on what I wanted to do. And if somebody ordered it, I would just start directing people to cook. I would have a few things in my back pocket that I knew I wanted to do, but a lot of it was just do this. And so think about a kitchen in the middle of a busy rush when the chefs have no idea what I'm going to ask them to do, but they were able to do it.
There's echoes of an early Tom in their mentality, wanting to work with a chef who's allowing them to cook literally and also just be able to write menus on the fly. It feels like that's a big part of your career, this mentorship that you give them.
Well, this is the way I'm not a planner. I'm not someone who does long-term planning. I'm someone who, and I'm very comfortable shooting from the hip. Also just knowing that the product is great. I know we can cook well. So it really doesn't matter now. You can wing it and it will work. And, occasionally you look at a dish and go, that could have been better. Sure. But that's all part of the having fun and experimenting and being in the moment. And the cool thing is you don't have to wait till the next day to change it. You could change it that very night. The next time somebody orders, you can go tweak that a little bit.
This shoot from the hip mentality, it came up in a recent David Chang interview with Marco, and they were talking about a time when you took a bandsaw to a bunch of asparagus, which is it's like Tom shoots from the hip, and it's literally shooting from the hip.
Well, that was to me. So this is to me. It's like one of these things. We needed asparagus for dinner service, and it came in very, very late. And then we had someone had to cut them all, and they come in this wooden box, right? And they're all packed.
Yeah,
in
you go to
nicely.
the Unisquare market, you get them in these crates.
Well, this came packed in a wooden box, and so literally they were like, "Stop!" I said, "Stop!" And went over to the bandsaw and just ripped it through, and it was like, "Here you go." And they were just like, "Oh my God, that's
through the
insane.
box."
It's funny. I have a podcast with David this afternoon.
oh yeah, I'm sure you're going to talk about that one. And of course, Chang worked with you at Kraft, and we'll get into that moment. And I don't want to spoil a really key moment in the book where you stand up in a meeting and speak to Danny in a way of you're frustrated. Hint at this, and please, listener, pick up this book because it's a moment that feels like it was a rubber hits the road moment for your career.
Yes. Danny, again, we were looking, I say we, because I remember looking at another space with Danny. Michael Romano was really interested in Indian cooking, and he wanted to do a restaurant. And Danny walked me over to a space on 26th Street off the park to take a look at it. I remember looking at it and saying, Danny, this looks like it's going to be really, really complicated. It's not a great space. And we were walking back to the office, back to Gramercy, and there were signs in the window where 11 Madison Tala was. And I said, well, that would be interesting. And he said, oh, they called me, but it's like 2 spaces and they're really big. I said, all right, well, let's go look at it. And so let's take a look at it. And we were going to do an Indian restaurant. Michael wanted to do an Indian restaurant. And then we were actually talking to Paul Bartolota about coming and doing an Italian seafood restaurant.
That's great. Wow. The history that would have changed with that
would have been fantastic. Yeah.
Wow.
And he couldn't work out a deal.
Wow.
But anyway, so I was involved in that. And then Danny had an offsite. And we had an offsite the year before that just to talk about, Gramercy. It was a planning session that we were doing. This was, I thought, one of those. And he unveiled his vision for the Union Square Hospitality Group. And what I didn't care about it was he essentially said, these 2 guys who had just started with us, one was getting, Danny was getting 51% of the company. One guy was getting 20, the other guy was getting 12. And myself and Michael Romano and so the guy Paul Bowles-Bevan, who was GM at Union Square Cafe, were getting 2 each. And I stood up and said, my partner and I own 40% of Gramercy Tavern. I don't know how you're making this calculation, but this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And then it was very apparent that he already had this conversation with everybody else, but not me. And I was like,
this isn't
going to work.
There was a mediator in the room.
There was a mediator in the room who spoke up, and I kind of looked at her and said, I don't know who you are, and you just need to be quiet right now. But he and I worked it out.
Yeah.
Like we actually worked it out, and
we actually end up selling Gramercy Tavern back to him.
Well, I sold my shares to him. In fact, the deal was worked out that I was going to buy them from him.
I know.
So I was the only person in New York who wasn't surprised when Will and Gadara and Daniel Hum bought 11 Madison from Danny, because I was like, I had this very similar deal. I was going to buy from him. And I thought about it over a weekend and decided that, I would be interested in selling out if he was amenable to paying me what I wanted.
Do you regret it?
There are absolutely times I regret it.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. Mainly because it's such an important restaurant, and just financially, I mean, owning that space is very valuable right now. So a lot of reasons I regret it, but on the same I don't. And the other thing that most people don't know is I didn't leave Gramercy to open Craft.
Yeah.
Craft was open for 2 years when I sold Gramercy back to Danny. And I did it for a bunch of reasons, but yeah, there's a regret, but at the same time, it doesn't keep me up at night.
No, I think you probably have much more going on in your life with your kids and fishing.
And I still would have had that all going on.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have changed. I probably wouldn't have opened another, maybe another restaurant. In fact, I had Craft Steak in Vegas opened already. And I had just shot the first season of Top Chef. So all that was happening.
Yeah.
And, but the reason I did it was because the heyday, at least for me, of Gramercy Tavern was when all those aforementioned chefs were in the kitchen, but also Nick Matone was the general manager, Paul Greco, who went on to do Hearth and Terroir.
Yeah.
He was our service director, beverage director, and that to me was the golden era.
Yeah,
I couldn't get it back to that.
No,
and so I didn't. I thought it was time for me to go.
I mean, let's just move on to Craft, because that is a new golden era, and you bring along Marco, you bring around some of the talent that
Benno, James Tracy, Akhtar.
This moment with Craft, though, you work the line at Gramercy Tavern on the opening night of Craft. This is interesting.
Well, not to me, because Danny's big worry was that I was going to open this restaurant and not pay attention to Gramercy. And so for me, this was proving, it's funny. Danny did the same thing the night that we opened Gramercy. He was at Union Square Cafe.
Yeah.
And for that very reason, he wanted to let the staff know that this new restaurant wasn't going to completely monopolize him. And so for me, it was the same thing. I was telling my staff at Gramercy that I'm not going to forget them.
Yeah.
And so opening night, it was around the corner, so it was easy. And, Craft was open, it was doing well. And I wasn't expediting. Marco was expediting at Craft. So I was just in the kitchen making sure things were right. But I was able to just walk around the corner and jump on the pass and expedite.
What are those first 2 years at Craft like? This is the early 2000s.
First 2 years at Craft, Craft, yeah.
Craft.
Oh, it was great. I mean, the thing is, Craft was such a different restaurant. And on purpose, I wanted the food to be very, very simple.
Yeah.
And there was a reason for it. So I was looking at dishes that I had done when I was at Mondrian. And I realized that when and I would do a lot of these dishes at Gramercy, and I realized that I was starting to pare them down a little bit. As you get a little more older and more confident, you don't need the bells and whistles. And so I was stripping things down. And so I thought, what would my food look like 20 years from now if I kept doing this? And so that was the idea behind doing very, very simple food, but finding the best thing. Also, during this time, people, we're talking about the farmers markets and great ingredients. And I was like, all right, so if we get this great ingredient like a morel, the first morels of the season, and we got to put them in 3 different dishes, they're on an appetizer, an entree, they're on a tasting menu. How about if we just serve a bowl of morels?
Yeah.
And then this all came into view. It was during the Beard Awards. And for a couple of years, I would have friends back to the private dining room at Gramercy.
Oh, busy week in New York in May.
Well,
always that way.
But it was right after the awards.
Yeah.
Before the parties. It was, let's go eat somewhere. Let's sit down. Let's eat. Thomas Keller and I would get together and go to Petrosian. That was our routine. We'd go to Petrosian, have a few people with us. And like my wife would come, Laura, his significant other, and a few other chefs that was with him. We would go to Petrosian and have caviar and champagne, and then go to the Beard Awards. And then I said, well, okay, let's come back to my restaurant. And so I remember calling my chef John Schaefer, that morning, and saying, okay, I'm going to have just 12 people back. And what I want a platter of roasted baby lamb. So we have the loin, the leg, the rack, the shoulders, roasted or braised pieces, all just laid out. Olive oil, some fresh herbs, that's it. I want a bowl of butter braised morels.
Oh, wow.
I want another bowl of peas, and I want some roasted asparagus. I don't want dishes, I just want them on the table. And I remember walking in and going, and I said, I'll call you when I want them out on the table. Because I wanted them on the table when we walked in because I wanted to get this fast. And I remember walking in and seeing this and going, that's the restaurant.
Incredible history there, Tom. And I think we joke about when you walk into a restaurant in 2024, people say we do things differently here. We're a shared plates restaurant. We're talking about the birth of new American shared plates in many ways. This is my statement, of course.
No, this is great, but we were doing large platters to share, not small plates to share.
No.
I hate this idea of small plates to share.
I know.
You share large plates. It's so frustrating to me if I'm out with 6 people.
I love this.
And I order something, I want to eat that. Someone puts it in the center of the table, and by the time it comes to me, it's a smudge on the plate. I want to eat the dish, and I want to actually pick through the dish. I want to eat several different bites. I want to make the perfect bite. I want to make the not-so-perfect bite. I hate that way of dining.
I know, and I think it goes back to a time when shared plates really meant plates, and I think, the economics have kind of shrunken down these plates. You're a P&L guy, so you know that might be, I'm defending these, like getting the one schmear of labna off the half piece of bread when you're like number 5.
Yeah.
We all are frustrated in that time, and like when you look at it, it's like $26. You're like, well, I got to have a teaspoon of labna on this little bread for $26.
You know, so with Kraft, I took a cue from going to Italy a lot.
Yeah,
because it's funny because Kraft, Serio Macchioni's wife had her birthday at the very beginning of Kraft, and she pulled me aside and she said, "Tom, this is the best Italian restaurant in the city." And I kind of smiled, and I smiled. She said, "What's that about?" I said, "We don't really label ourselves an Italian restaurant, but it was. It absolutely was." And in Italian in the sense of you're getting very simple food, beautiful products, simply prepared, and you're ordering, a piece of meat, and it's going to be enough for 2 people, and then you're ordering your sides, and you're making a meal.
Yeah, if you travel throughout Italy, of course, pasta happens in certain meals, but other meals, of course, it doesn't. And this is the style of dining.
Yeah.
And
we had pasta dishes too.
Of course.
But the whole idea was, and then we had oversized tables to accommodate all the platters. And so it was a very different kind of restaurant.
What a fun era, early 2000s, in that, you had like Man Ray, the club nearby. You had like these, it was like downtown had a real like creative energy. I think it's kind of come back post-pandemic in New York. I think downtown Manhattan.
I don't know. The problem with the creative energy is it's too expensive for creatives to actually live here anymore.
For sure.
They get pushed out to, the boroughs, which is fine. When I started working in New York, the artists that I knew, they were living in squats in Soho. Mm-hmm. Right? The idea of squatting in Soho now, means you're homeless.
Yeah.
No, it was a very, very different time. And quite frankly, I was in New York working during the AIDS epidemic. That changed everything. That really changed New York in a big way. I think we don't look back on it and kind of understand how much that changed everything in the city. When you had when I had waiters dying.
Yeah.
And I had a cook at Raquel who was bisexual, who was married, he had kids, and he got AIDS and his whole family died. It was a terrible, terrible time. And it was a time where everybody was scared because I guess very much like the pandemic, but I remember living through then being scared, and especially, as a 20-something-year-old cook in the city, sex was a big part of the landscape. It's hard to say it wasn't. And then all of a sudden you were afraid of having sex. Yeah. You were scared to death. And people stopped going out as much. It was a tough time, but also losing friends. It was a tough thing to go through.
Yeah. I hope you can say more about that in future episodes because we have more to cover on this. But I think that's when we talk about these big cultural changes and these big world changes in New York, like the pandemic is one, the AIDS crisis is another. But post-pandemic, are you optimistic about New York dining? Or, do you dine out yourself?
Not that much. I don't. Post-pandemic, I got used to being home with my kids and my wife, and I'm spending more and more time at home.
You have teenagers now.
Yeah, tonight. So my son is in school, and tonight's the school play. He's part of the crew. He's not a cast member, but he's in and we're going. If this were 20 years ago, there was no way I would go to a thing at night. I'd have to be in the restaurant. And so
that's wonderful. And
so my priorities are a little different.
You're a lucky guy. That's very cool.
Dining post pandemic, it's come back.
Yeah, but
it's going to be it's tough. We had a tough summer. Fall's been fine. We had a tough summer, but it feels better. This is going to be controversial. And now it is the law's changed, so I can say this. I think the sheds had to go. And I know a lot of people made additional money during the pandemic. It was important. But I think as long as those sheds are the symbol of the pandemic, one of the symbols in the city.
It's a buzzkill.
And I think we need it to get behind us. And I know that's not a popular statement that I'm going to make. But sidewalk dining, love it. Glad that it's easier to get permits. It's more acceptable. I think that's great. But I think we had to put this in our rearview mirror.
Have there been any initiatives from the Adams administration here in New York that have helped restaurants?
I mean, I think making it easier for sidewalk dining, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
There's a couple things working their way through the legislative in New York that is horrible. There's one law in particular where they can go after the investors in the restaurant. So if you have one of these wage and hour lawsuits against you, they can actually go into the investors and put liens on their homes. If this goes through, there is not a single person
There's no
who will
capital.
invest in a capital will be gone.
The faucet is changed.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
And there was another one that hopefully, I think it got shot down, where independent restaurants in hotels would have had to
license
change
deals.
Right. Would have had to change the way they do business. And hopefully that changed.
Is tipping broken in New York right now?
I think we should get rid of tipping not for the reasons why a lot of people want to get rid of tipping. My feeling is just, I'd rather it be a meritocracy. Like right now it's not, because here's the thing. If you give someone a bad tip, you get bad service, and you give someone a bad tip, my waiters aren't telling me that. I have a pooled house, right? That just goes in the pool. No one's going to open their mouth. If you don't tip anymore and you're getting bad service, you call a manager over and say, I got really rude service.
Yeah.
Now we can actually, deal with that.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather it be a meritocracy where someone's going to make, like I did the work, the numbers. My captains would be making $50 an hour.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to pay them $50 an hour. If I'd have to increase my menu prices by 25%.
That's going to be interesting.
But it's the same and why the 5% when most people tip 20%? It's because now it's taxable.
Yeah.
It's taxable income. And so there's tax burden to me and also to the
which may change.
But my waiters are all on the books.
Yeah.
I pay them on the books. They don't get cash.
Yeah.
We take most of the money comes in credit cards, and then we distribute it on a paycheck. Yeah, it's on a paycheck.
I mean, both candidates in this past election have said they were going to. Your face says it all. Said they were going to take away taxes from tipping.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's not
great.
Yeah, that was trying to get Nevada votes.
I think this exactly. It's how to get Nevada votes, and I think it's probably two people who really don't understand. That it's not like someone handing you like a couple dollars and you put it in your pocket. That doesn't get declared anyway.
Yeah.
Right. If someone takes cash and puts it in their pocket, that's not being declared. Most people get their paycheck.
Yeah, through
the tips on a
computer.
paycheck.
Yeah,
it's on a paycheck.
Well, I have a final election question at the end of this, so stick around for that. But I want to continue just like putting a little bow on craft. I just really love Tom's Tuesday dinners and Damon's Frugal Fridays, which back in the day, Damon Weiss. I love Damon Weiss. He's such a terrific chef. Barbecue pitmaster and a cool guy. But tell me when the financial crisis hit, you kind of pivoted a little bit. Talk about those dinners, those two series.
Well, the Tuesday dinner came about because when I opened Craft, I was at Gramercy. So I was doing that food, my style of cooking at Gramercy. And then I opened Craft. It's very, very simple. Now I sell Gramercy. I'm only doing Craft. And now I'm becoming known on Top Chef. Now all of a sudden I hear people come into Craft and going, this is it? This is all he does? Because it was so simple.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, man, this is like, I got to do something
about
this.
You got to take advantage of this
and also,
platform.
And I'll be honest, I was, nominated for Beer Awards. So I won my region, New York. And so now you're eligible for Best Chef in the Country. And I went from being nominated to not even making the short list, not even making the long
list. Yeah.
And back then the long list was private. You didn't know about the long list, but I knew about it. And so I was going like, something's going on here. And so I was like, you know what? Let's do this Tuesday dinner thing. I do the Tuesday dinner thing. I win. But I thought about it. It's like, I have to have an outlet to do my, be creative because craft is not creative. It was never meant to be a creative venture.
It's a workman-like restaurant in many ways because you're trying to nail the farmer's market.
It was just making sure the product was front and center.
Yeah, of course.
And obviously, when you're doing plated dishes and more creative foods, the product's still front and center, but you're sort of combining it in interesting ways and different techniques and things like that. Anyway, so I knew I wanted to do that, so we started doing that. Now we're doing that once a month, and recession hits, and we came up with this Frugal Friday where the menu was really inexpensive, and it was like really interesting food.
$30. I went 3 times. I was covering the scene at that time.
$30.
It was amazing. It was kind of in the basement. The space was kind of...
No, it was the original Craft Bar.
Oh, it was in Craft Bar. Okay.
That was the original Craft Bar, and then we moved Craft Bar around the corner, and that became a private dining room. So we were doing it there because private dining business completely.
That's what it was. It was cool.
And so we started doing this Frugal Friday.
Yeah.
It was alliterative, so why not?
Why not?
Tom's Tuesday.
Yeah.
And Damon had full control over the menu. And he was doing really quirky,
cool.
Interesting food. It was kind of Neo Bistro before people actually turned Neo Bistro.
That's a great call. It was definitely like Neo Bistro. You could see in like Paris in 2017.
Yep.
Same kind of menu.
Same kind of menu, yeah.
Yeah, wow. What a moment. Like, Tom, before we get to Top Chef stuff, like, where do you find yourself cooking these days?
Home. I still spend time in the restaurants. I'm still in the restaurants. In fact, the Jacques Pepin dinner that we just did, I did a new menu for that. A lot of new dishes that I've never done before. In the kitchen, touching every single dish that went out. It's a blast. Love doing it.
Yeah.
My back hurt the next day. My knees hurt the next day.
Are you rusty when you're like?
I'm 62 years old. I get tired, man. I mean, on my feet, and for the last 40 years, and multiple surgeries, and it's hard. Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What will bring you into a restaurant? I mean, the Jacques dinner made sense, but I mean, will you just pop by just to make sure things are working?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago, on Saturday night. I'm usually never in the restaurant on Saturday night. I think I just decided to pop in, and I spent 2 or 3 hours expediting. I just walked in and
that's cool.
Took the pen and started expediting, and it was a blast.
Yeah,
love doing it. But I'm able to when I get tired, it's like I tap out. It's like I'm done. Occasionally, pre-pandemic, I would jump on the line and cook.
Yeah,
just because I love cooking on the line. And so I would take one of the young cooks who now maybe the new on the meat station, and I would say, all right, I'll work with you. And I would work the station. And, but again, after 2 hours, I could top out and go,
you're like, you guys,
I'm done.
Pick it back up.
I'm done. Yeah. So this is really funny, really funny story. So when we opened Velata, our Italian trattoria, that was right next door to Kraft's, I'm working the pasta station every night. And this one woman we hired, she was I think from Thailand. And she was working alongside of me, and I would come in at 5 o'clock, 5:30. The station was already set up. I wasn't setting up the station. I walk in and I'd start cooking, and then probably around 10:30 at night, I'd have a glass of wine, and then when the last pasta was out, I leave. And so about a week or so in, she asked one of the chef de cuisine. She's like, "Who this old guy who comes in, like, he's really good, but like, why does he get to come in at 5:30 and leave it?"
She was complaining about you dropped.
And he was like, "That's the chef owner." She had no idea, which I really loved. It was great because I was just like, in Chef Conan and pair of jeans.
Kids these days, they're on TikTok. They're not watching basic cable. Man.
I would jump in and do my thing, but it was I love line cooking.
Yeah.
I just wish I can do it.
You pick your spots, but what about menu development with your guys? I mean, how does that work?
I still do that.
Yeah. Well, you're a nerd. You love this stuff.
But I work. So I have 2 direct reports.
Yeah.
I have my director of operations and my executive chef. Those are the only 2 direct reports. So I usually work with our executive chef, Brian, who did his internship with me at Gramercy.
Oh, wow.
That's how long he got. And then from there, he worked at Insieme with Marco and Paul.
I feel like you probably are always thinking about food. Do you have like a notes app on your phone? How are you thinking about new dishes?
I do have a notes app, and occasionally I use it, but I never refer to it. I do a lot of, it's funny. When it comes time, I spend a lot of time on Instagram looking at what's happening, like every other chef does. And you see things that are like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. I'm never going to do that dish. But it's like, oh, I kind of like that. And then when it comes time to making a menu, I shut myself off from everything. I don't go to restaurants. I don't look at anything, and I want to see what comes out of it. And so I'm always looking. I should go to restaurants more frequently, and I just don't for some stupid reason.
I mean, why? What's the stupid? I mean, there's got to be a better than stupid
I live in Brooklyn now, and I get home. Once I get home, I don't want to leave my house.
Hey, man, there's restaurants in Brooklyn.
I know there is.
I'm just going to tell you.
I know there are. And I go to a few of them. I live in Fort Greene, so I go to Theodore's really good, and Sailor's really good, and there's a whole bunch of restaurants there that are great.
Is it celebrity stuff? Because I mean, is it a little uncomfortable?
No.
Not you, but like it becomes a little bit of a thing.
I do get overfed.
Overfed, but you also get a lot of photos, which I'm sure you're fine with.
But... Yeah, I'm fine. That's all. I just, once I get home, I don't want to go out.
Man.
I just get home and I'm with my family and we just hang out. It's hard. And my wife, the same thing after, a busy day, she doesn't want to go out. But I need to start getting out more.
You have a nice kitchen. I'm sure you have some
I
space.
do.
So brother, I respect it. No need to say more.
No, but it's also, I just need, I have friends that open restaurants. And Andrew Carmelini, I haven't been to his restaurant.
You haven't been to
really should go.
Yet?
No, I really should go.
Yeah.
I should support him. I should, but I
do the Graham thing, support it, all that. Yeah. Okay. Top Chef. Again, I wanted this conversation to be about your career. Thank you, Tom. It's been really, really cool. But let me ask you just simply about Top Chef. What's the best thing and worst thing about filming Top Chef?
So the best thing is I love the people I work with. I love the fact that I get to mentor a lot of up-and-coming chefs because what the average person doesn't see, because, we have 6 to 7 cameras shooting. It takes 2 days to shoot an episode, 6 to 7 cameras shooting 14 hours a day. All right. You see 48 minutes of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and forth. We're not allowed to interact with the chefs off camera. Sometimes judges table and that critique portion of it could take 2 hours, 3 hours. You're not seeing any of that. So there's a lot of information that we're giving them. And you start hearing afterwards going they listen to what we're saying and they come out of the experience saying it's changed me. The experience has changed them too. And, it makes you look in. It makes you, dig down deep because it's hard. It's very, very hard. So I love that aspect of it. Love the people I work with. It's like, I always say, it's like going to summer camp.
Yeah.
Because the majority of the cameramen, the ADs, the directors, the producers, I see them for 6 or 7 weeks. And that's it. And then I don't see them again. Maybe I see them during the Emmys and things like that. And then the following year, you go back and do it again.
And then you have stories that report back from your other lives.
And it's great. The downside, and it's not so much a problem anymore, but when I first started doing the show, I'd get really angry. And it took me, I was trying to figure out why I was getting angry when they would say, show up at a certain time and you get there, and then we wouldn't shoot for 3 hours. And I'm like, I'm sitting around here for 3 hours. Like, can't you call me later? And the response that I got was, I'm treating you like treat any talent, the people in front of the camera are called talent, right?
Right.
And so I was like, listen, I have a business to run. I'm on the phone. And he said, the guy was like, I didn't know you were still doing that. And so I realized that I was getting angry because in my life, I control my schedule. I control what I do, when I do it, where I go. Now all of a sudden someone's making a schedule for me and I didn't like it. And so I had to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But that's really the only downside. I mean, that and the fact that I'm away from my family for the 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Although I do fly back and forth depending on where we are.
And you're gearing up for a new filming?
Oh, no, we just finished.
You just finished?
Yeah, we just finished. Yeah, we shot in Toronto, I can say that.
Yeah.
And then we just shot our finale. I can't say where that was.
Yeah, but tell us, was it a competitive season, I would imagine?
It was, I think, the most competitive season we've ever had. Probably my favorite season.
Love to hear that. And that leads to my next question. I've asked our friend Gail Simmons about this too. It's incredible how the show has gained popularity. That is like the inverse of literally every television show made. What has happened with Top Chef? How has it actually grown in popularity as the seasons roll on?
I think it's real, and I think people realize that. Our critique is not about, zingers and one-liners that's, Instagrammable. It's not who I am. It's not what I want to do.
No.
And I think we all realize that we have to be really honest. When I say all of us, me, Gail, Kristen, whoever the guest judge is, like real honest conversation about food. And I think it comes through that we're not looking to make TV.
No.
We're serious about food that we're doing. The chefs are all really accomplished. We don't bring on home cooks and things like that. And so I think it comes through. I think the authenticity comes through.
Favorite winner from the past 21, 22 years? Favorite
I
winner?
don't have a favorite. I can't have a favorite.
I'm trying to.
One of my favorite finale meals, was Melissa King's.
Yeah.
I thought what she did was just brilliant. She's Chinese American. We're in Italy, and she managed to weave this Italian theme into her Chinese cooking. That was really just beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much talent there. I mean, going back to I just had Angelo Sosa on the show from season 2. You just get so much. And his restaurants right now are like really good.
Yeah,
like
he's
out
a
in
good
Phoenix.
chef.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, again, we bring in working chefs who are on the show. And listen, Angelo also, going back, that was 16 years ago or something. He's, he also was one of those chefs who decided, I'm going to be pasta with something I'm passionate about. I'm going to study it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to be a chef here. I'm not going to be running around, and getting wrapped up in celebrity.
Yeah.
I want to make great food, and he does.
And you see it time and again. Your alumni, even if folks have not made it that far, they're working.
Oh, sure.
They're not doing social media.
Kwame Owichi's probably the hottest chef in America right now.
Yeah.
He, I think, was I don't know. I don't think he made it to the finale.
Yeah.
Yes, because he was same thing with him. He leaves Top Chef, gets wrapped up in doing this tasting menu, doesn't work out. Then he does another restaurant, and it does work out, but he has a problem with his partner, and then he goes on and
Tatiana is still
and he's opened a second restaurant in D.C. and his
his career has been incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a remarkable show that the format really hasn't changed that much. I mean, Restaurant Wars has been part of our lives for.
Yeah. There's a few things, little tweaks here and there, but no, the format hasn't changed,
which makes it incredible that it actually is still popular. Are you involved in casting at all?
No, I'm just involved in complaining about casting every season.
You see your list, and you're like, who the heck?
No, it's not that. It's like I think sometimes there's a reaction. So if someone runs away with a season, like a Buddha Low, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe if we get someone that talented on, it's going to run away from it's not going to be a horse race. And so now we dumb it down a little bit. No one will say they're doing that, but you get a sense that it's happening.
Yeah.
And then it's like, come on, just give me, 8 chefs that are going to really. But, there's various ways of casting. We're casting for diversity, obviously.
Yeah.
Casting, our industry is not made up equally of men and women. And we usually cast it right down the center every season. And so I'm really proud of that. And also what that does is the hardest thing, especially now, and the barrier to opening a restaurant is getting funding.
I know.
If you're a minority, you're a woman, that's even more difficult. And I think our show provides a showcase for those communities that after the show they get funding.
Yeah.
And so that is probably what we're most proud of.
Last question. I said it in the top. I wanted to talk about the election, and we're recording this 2 days after the results are in, and Trump will be president. Tom, let me ask you about just the shifting in voting. It's been clear, and again, we're 2 days out, so we don't know the full picture, but it's clear that in every state, the Latino vote has shifted towards Trump. And I make the observation that, in restaurants, Latino workers are the backbone of restaurants. We've been saying this for a long time. It's obvious if you walk into restaurants. I think there's a perception perhaps that restaurants may be more liberal spaces and places that maybe have leaned left, but clearly that's not the case looking at the electorate. What is your observation with the way that Latino voters have definitely shifted right and so many of these individuals are working in restaurants?
I don't know if it's a right-left issue. I think the shift was inflation. Simple as that. I campaigned for Kamala Harris. I was knocking on doors on Tuesday morning in Pennsylvania, in Bucks County.
I was in Michigan.
And was I disappointed? Yeah. You look at the reaction everywhere. There was a couple things. And it was like just a bunch of different little things that I think caused so many people to just not necessarily vote for Trump, but not vote for the Democrat.
Yeah.
And I think inflation was a big problem. And as much as we want to look at the numbers and go, inflation's come down, and unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. The stock market's through the roof. These are all indicate. I mean, the Wall Street Journal 2 days before the election said the next president will inherit the best economy ever. somehow
That's a right-leaning publication. We could say that. That's a
yeah,
non-political.
yeah.
That's not a. I mean, let's be real.
And somehow the Biden administration couldn't communicate that. And I think that they believe that if they just did things, and did a lot of really great things. You think about the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, there's so many things that they passed that were just really good just great law that helped the American public. They weren't messaging. I think they thought they did these things and the press was just going to put it out there. And, go back to FDR. I mean, obviously the medium is different, right? The medium is the message, right? And so FDR, during coming out of the Depression, the fireside chat, right? He would come into your living room. Was it once a week, whatever it was, and talk to you about what was happening. Could you imagine if the Biden administration got on TikTok, on Instagram, on all these media channels, and all at once just had them all, shooting them live and broadcasting? This is what we're doing, right?
In
this
real
week,
time. Yeah,
this is what we're doing.
Policy points.
This is what's happening.
Like
okay,
real time.
Yes, inflation is high. These are the reasons why. Number one, we pumped a ton of money into the system. Well, what's the alternative? That $400 a week that you got when you were on unemployment, that extra money that the federal government was putting into unemployment, the alternative is you didn't get that, you were out of your house, right? So what's the alternative to that? And saying, yes, inflation will go up. Absolutely.
When they started getting the checks from day one, they said that.
Well, and they were doing things to bring it down, and they did bring it down, but prices aren't down. Inflation is back down to 2% vis-a-vis what prices are now, right? Mm-hmm. But this needed to be explained. And the idea, the Latino vote, these are the same people who just, they're shopping in supermarkets too. Price of milk's up, eggs are up, everything's up. And they're sitting going like, this didn't happen under the other guy. And I think it's that simple.
It was a messaging issue with the Democratic candidate.
When people forget about the pandemic.
Yes.
Right? And they forget that, Biden became the president under the worst circumstances, turned it around, prevented a recession, which everybody was pretty clear.
They were like, we're going to have it. Be ready.
So listen, if you were investing in the stock market in the last 3 years, you're happy as hell. But there's too many Americans who aren't investing in the stock market. And there's too many Americans who are sitting here just trying to pay bills. And they got pissed off. And they got pissed off when they looking at someone who they look at as being the elites saying, oh, it's not that bad. And I was guilty of that myself on social media, saying, well, things aren't that bad.
I know.
And coming from a very blue class background and watching my mother struggle to pay bills. So I think this is pretty easy to understand. I think whether it's Latino men, whether it's black men, whether it's white women, who just decided not to vote for the Democrat.
Yeah,
that's what I don't think it's anything more than that. There's something else that I thought was really, really interesting. And when Trump was saying it, everybody was like, it's just like, I can't believe this is coming out of his mouth. He would say, everybody wanted this to go to the states, meaning abortion. Everybody wanted it to go to the states. Now it's in the states. There were 6 ballot initiatives. I think it was Oklahoma, Nevada,
Kansas,
Florida. Kansas already passed.
Oh, yeah.
Just for this election. Arizona, where abortion was enshrined into the state constitutions, except for Florida. And Florida changed the ballots where you had to get 60%
super
of the vote.
Majority.
They got 57% of the vote.
Very close.
Okay. Yet those same people that voted for that ballot initiative and to enshrine abortion also voted for the president, their congressman, their senator who doesn't support bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
Square that.
Yeah.
What happened is Trump was smart enough to say, I'm going to create the permission structure for you to vote for abortion in your state, but also you don't have to vote for the politicians because you take it out of the politicians' hands.
Yeah.
Now that could change. He says he won't
repeal
pass
Roe federally.
Well, no, that's already repealed. He said he won't sign a bill that outlaws abortion.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And so, but there's these little things that happened over the course of the last couple of weeks that I just, you look at now in retrospect and say, okay, we should have seen this coming. You get caught up in it, it's hard to see. But I don't think this is a repudiation of the Democratic Party. I think this is just bad times for the last 3 years, and a lot of working class people looked at this and just said, "Enough's enough."
Yeah. And a candidate who messaged it correctly.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
to that.
Democrats do a very bad job of messaging.
Yeah, it was a
They
messaging
really do.
issue. Last question. I want to ask you about speaking to President-elect. What can he do to help a restaurant worker's life become better? You're shaking your head.
I don't know. I don't know. Most of that's going to happen on the state level. I think there are things that are probably going to happen to make a small business owner easier to run a business. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help the worker.
Right. The person signing the checks on the front is going to probably benefit than the guy signing checks on the back.
Sure. Remains to be seen. Listen, I think most economists agree that if he puts these tariffs through, it's going to cause inflation to go back up. If you follow the bond market's getting crushed, and it usually means that interest rates are on their way back up.
It's coming, yeah.
The bond market's a little more forward leaning, and so that could hurt. That's going to hurt everything.
That's what the Democrats warned. So that message was correct.
The economists warned that.
All right, I guess
the Wall Street Journal warned that.
Right, good point.
It's not Democrats that win. This is just it's going to happen, and we'll see. But this is what you voted for. This is what the country voted for, and we'll see what happens.
I've observed this on the show. I don't know you, but I've followed your work with Restaurant Coalition and your obvious engagement with politics. Tom, have you considered running for public office?
I've been recruited to run for public office.
I have been recruiting you on the show. So just for
I thought about it. New York. I have a house in Long Island in Mattituck, and that's New York 1. We lost that race again. John Avalon was a good candidate, lost again, and I thought about it, but I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. This is what I love about it. Someone's like, stay out of politics. You know nothing about it. It's like, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. As much as I would like to do it, and seeing an election like this, it really kind of makes me want to do it even more.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in Washington. I like being with my family. And I think it would just be very, very, what I know of D.C. and the time I spent there, I think it'd be very, very frustrating. So I don't completely.
That's not a no, Tom.
It's not a no. It's not a no. But right now, I don't see that happening.
It seems that as a change candidate too, looking at the next 4 years, Tom, you could be quite well aligned, speaking as you do, and you seem center in some ways.
Oh, I am.
Ideas.
I am. I think I probably lean left. But I'm not that far.
Yeah. Hey man, I'm not trying to be your media spokesman here, but I appreciate you being really candid about your recruitment, because it would be terrific to see you in government.
I thought about it, but I don't know. I think it would just it would drive me up a wall. And the other aspect of it is most of your job is fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about just Congress, which obviously you are, that 2-year term is tricky. But you're a young man. These politicians are up there in their 70s. There's some bigger.
I know
fish to fry.
I mean, it's it's one of the questions I got yesterday when I did an event. So you've done a lot. Is there anything anything left to do? And that's the only thing I can think.
Yeah, well, let's leave that talk at that. Tom, on This Is Taste, West guests about the discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Sure.
The best fruit.
Mango.
The worst vegetable.
Okra.
Yeah. You just won't put it on a menu.
No, I won't eat it.
Yeah. The best dessert.
I like citrus.
Yeah.
Lemon curd, lemon tart, something like that, yeah. Sorbet, citrus sorbet.
Spend that time out on the West Coast in January, February. Must be a nice time for you.
You get it here. It's all good.
It's true. Very true. It is New York City. Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
I haven't been to a lot of them, but of the ones I've been to, Singapore was fantastic.
Yeah.
Also, I just love crab, and the chili crab is one of my favorite things in the world to eat.
Your favorite cookbook of all time?
There's a book called Unplugged Kitchen by Viana de Place, I think is her name. Mm-hmm. I just love the book.
Yeah.
It's very simple, and it's like one of those books that I got it years ago, and occasionally I pick it up and it makes me happy.
Unplugged Kitchen. I'm going to check that. I don't know that one. That's really cool. Is there a recent cookbook discovery that really is exciting you?
Let me think for a second. I get a lot sent to me. I just got a Thai. I should know the authors. I think she has a restaurant in Philadelphia. It's a Thai.
Kalaya.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah, Southern Thai. She's been on the show.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And so I just received it, and I like it. It's pretty. I love Thai food.
Yeah.
I'll never cook it in a restaurant. There was one dish when I had Colicchio and Sons. There was a dish that kind of was definitely in that direction. And I should go look for that.
Was there a paste of some sort? What takes it in that direction?
Oh no, I was using like I don't know if it's Thai, but those thin sheets of there's sauce, but they're like really thin sheets. I saw it first in Singapore. It's almost like pork leather.
Oh yeah.
It's really good. So I remember using that, and there were chilies in
floss.
it. Yeah, maybe that's what it's called, but there were chilies in it and things like that. And the dish was, I think it was like a stuffed squid, and I stuffed it with some of the Thai sausage, and it's really spicy, and rice, and it was stuffed, and then the squid was roasted, and then had a chili sauce, and then it had a very, very fine chiffonade of that pork floss.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah,
I love
it was fun.
Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Favorite sandwich? God, I don't know. That's hard. Summer tomato sandwich is hard to beat. BLT in the summer is hard to beat.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. Tom Colicchio, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com. And make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.